All right. So, John, you say in a vanity obsessed, power crazed society, there are few things more attractive than a person marked with humility and gentleness. Christian, this is a friendly reminder that your life on earth isn't about you. If God has blessed you with a platform, use it for his glory. So, I'm curious, first off, where did this tweet come from? Where did this come from in your mind and in your heart?
Came from a lot of places.
All right.
Just from a place of, at this point, I'm 32 years old, and came from a place of my life looking back on certain pastors, certain influencers that even I know, people that aren't actually famous, but were social media famous in the day, and seeing them fall away from Jesus or take a step away from Jesus, or things like that, or like stuff blow up and all of a sudden it's found out that they've been living a double life, and all these things. And so it came from a place of seeing that happen and being like, oh man. And then also looking back on my life and reviewing the people that now are in a place of, they still have a platform, but like they've handled it with grace and humility and gentleness and kindness and self-control, and these things that like the Bible speaks of quite often, especially the New Testament. And really, also, it just so happened that I believe around the time that I wrote that tweet, I found a soundbite from Francis Chan, and I couldn't agree with it more, but he talked about how we've created, social media has allowed us to create little shrines of vanity for ourselves. Where we make these perfect little images about our lives, where people come and praise us for how good we look or how smart we are or how great the project that we're working on is or whatever. But we create these little shrines of vanity for ourselves where people come and sing their praises for us. And that hit me in the face, because I was like, holy, okay, yep, he's on to something. And so it was this perfect timing of situations and moments in my life, and at the time that I tweeted that, where I was like, yeah, like I've been having more and more young people follow me again, more and more young influencers follow me again. And I was like, okay, maybe this is a good time to like put this out there and just say like, all right, here's a little warning. Like I've walked life with some people that have done this, and maybe consider this before we go out there and try and build a platform, or as we're building a platform, that's kind of where it came from in a roundabout way.
Yeah. Do you think that church leaders should be like aggressively fighting against any perception that they are a center of attention, or that they are coolness, and we should look at that coolness and be inspired by it? Like, how should a church leader be trying to conduct themselves?
That's another great question. It's a hard one to answer, because you can't control people's perception. People are always going to perceive you how they're going to perceive you. And so what you can do is not give them the ammo to perceive you in a way that isn't the way that you want to be perceived. Right. And it's this idea that like, hey dude, like if I was taking pictures of myself in private jets, getting out of private jets, jumping into Bentleys and being driven by my assistant to my church to give a message, that, I mean, you're setting yourself up in a certain light. But if I'm just posting encouraging, and like, I'm not, okay, hear my heart. So I'm not saying that those things, like having a private jet, having a Bentley, like if that's your life, like live it. But like, I'm saying if that's how you want to be seen, then do it. But like, if you're wanting to be seen as a humble, gentle, kind, not self-serving, but like other serving, like Jesus loving pastor, then maybe don't post that stuff. You can still have that stuff, but like maybe don't flaunt it. And maybe just post things about how you're helping the community and how you're serving those that need help and all these kind of things. And so so that's what I would say with that. So I think pastors should be mindful, but I don't think they should be afraid of being successful and whatever that means. Because I think it's both. And I think we've done a terrible injustice to pastors that that hustle, that have other side gigs like writing books and things like that, and we demonize them when we see them having big houses and things like that, because we're like, oh, how dare they be successful and have these things, when that's not always, it's not always from the church's pocket that's coming from. That's
Sure.
Sometimes it's from their own. They got real estate businesses, or they have other streams of income that
Yeah, or
they're
books.
making money. Yeah, books.
Yeah.
Wrote albums, co-write albums with people that aren't in the churchy world. Stuff like that. That I'm like, you don't know how they're making the money. They're not taking this all from people. So, but there are that have, and so I can understand like why people are cautious. But I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but
No. I think it's interesting to noodle around with an answer and try to figure out what the answer is. I don't think that we need to know exactly what that is immediately.
Right.
I think that that's actually a bad thing if we just jump in and go, oh, it's definitely this, or it's definitely not this.
I mean, in the Bible, so like Jesus had successful people fund his ministry. Jesus had people that had money in his life. Judas's job was to keep the books, right? He was a bookkeeper. He made sure all the bills were paid. He made sure like there was enough money to eat. There were like all this stuff. So Jesus had people that were successful, that he stayed at their houses. He did all these things, right?
Yeah.
So
you certainly get the perception that there was a lot of organization that went on. Either that, or God just divinely placed everything where it needed to be.
I mean, both.
Right?
So you'll find out in this conversation, I think, that like I'm in a position now, it could be my age, could be whatever, but I embrace the both. I embrace like, I mean, so like, here's the deal. So Jesus did rebuke the rich young ruler, and he said like, get rid of everything and then like you'll be good. And the rich young ruler went away sad, right? But like Jesus also surrounded himself with people that were successful and had money. And so like Jesus never demonized money and wealth. Jesus, what he did say was that the love of money, or the obsession with money, is bad, right? So it's like it's not, money itself is a tool, and Jesus used money to forward his ministry and to send it forward. And Paul was the same way. Paul had Lydia of Nicaea, who was a cloth dyer, and in that day, cloth dyeing was like super lucrative. Purple dyes for the ruling class and everything like that. Yeah, I mean, you would be sitting pretty, large houses and things like that, and they would meet in the houses of these early church folk that were huge. And so I would say both positions are dangerous, right? So the obsession with money is dangerous, and the obsession with living a life of poverty is dangerous, right? So like sometimes God gives people the gifting of entrepreneurship, gives people the gifting of organization, of administration, of these things that like when applied to real world situations, you'll be set up for success, because God created the world in such a way that like you do certain things, like you'll be successful. But it's when that success becomes your God, and you forget your first love, and you forget the one who gave you the stuff, right? You forget the gift giver, and it's dangerous. And so it's a tension, right? So like there were very, very poor people in the early church, and there were very, very rich people in the early church, and Jesus had stuff to say to both people. Like even the very, very poor people, Jesus still gave them spiritual guidance and counseling and advice, and to the very, very rich he did. And so that's kind of where I land, is that like the demonization of either or. So like saying like we can't have poor people in our church is just as bad as saying we can't have rich people in our church, or we can only have rich people. Like it's and we need everybody, right?
Yeah. And in the Bible, you have a lot of complementing ideas. You'll get this and that later on, right? Now, I say complementing intentionally because I don't think they're contradictions. I think they complement each other. You'll have be very careful with money, because it's hard to enter the kingdom of heaven if you're rich. But also if you are, if you don't support your family, you are worse than an unbeliever. Well, both of those are pretty bad. You don't want to be either one of those, right? And so you put those together and you go, okay, where's the middle ground here?
Mean? Yep.
Yeah. And you look at the full counsel of the word, but And then also, one of the things that's really helped me is just to look at money sheerly as a tool. I think we put a lot of emotional weight around money and what it is and what it does for us. And, money is power and money is evil. Money is the root of, all these things. We put a lot of emphasis on money and people who need money and people who don't need money. Right. In our society, we see that a lot. It's like, okay, the rich people, they need less money. Jeff Bezos, he needs to give almost all of that away to the lower class. And then we have the lower class. We need to give them money. We need to give them this and this to help them be more, sustained. I think that the goal is to use money wisely and recognize it as something that God has given to us to use.
I agree.
And so if that means, Jesus did say to people, I literally just read that story that you mentioned this morning. Jesus said to him, give everything away. Right. And that's because Jesus knew his heart and knew that that was the thing that he was holding on to and that he was gonna hold on to.
Right.
So now that doesn't mean that everybody should give their money away. I think that for a lot of people, it's actually more like, okay, you have this money, but you're saving so much and you're not willing to tip your waiter more, right? You're scared to tip your waiter generously, or you're scared to do big, bold things with your money and actually do it in a way that is saying, God gave it to me and I'm giving it out, right? Because I know he's going to bless me more. And obviously that's only part of why we do it, but I know that he's going to bless me more. I know that if he wants me to have money, he'll give me money, whatever his plan is. If he wants me to not have money, I won't have money. It's all good. Right. I know his plan, or I know he has a plan, rather. We don't always know his plan.
I was like, you know his plan? That's great.
Yeah.
Want to share your notes after the conversation?
That's why I made this channel, because God revealed his plan to me. But no, we don't know his plan, but we know that he has a plan. Right. We know that we can trust in his plan.
Right.
Money or not. Okay. So back to this idea about being, vanity obsessed and power crazed as a society.
Right.
Why do you think society is that way? And is it, I guess the next question is it a bad thing? I mean, we maybe start with that. Is it a bad thing that it's that way? And then why is it that way? And what could make it not be that way? Sorry, that's a lot of questions at once.
That's great. Vanity obsessed and power hungry. Yeah. I mean, and again, it's that tension, right? So it's not. So it depends on your definition of vanity and power, right? So like, I would say, so like me, myself, some people would look at me because I have a platform, whatever that means. So I have people that follow me, and like some people would look at that and say, man, like John is important. John has important things to say about important things. And like, man, when he says stuff, I'm amazed. I don't know if anyone actually says this, but like people could say this, like, and like, that's cool. Like if other people say that, I'm like, they can say that, but like, I don't want to be the one to say like, I say important things and people should listen and pay attention, because like, that's when it becomes like, oh, okay. Like, probably not, chief, like, if I ever get that way, I hope I have people in my life that be like, hey, John, you might want to like lay off the cult pills for a little bit, because like,
you need somebody who can slap you around a little bit if you get to that point, right?
You're off base, man. Like this isn't good. So, and it's again, kind of what I said about your question about pastors, right? So like, I can't control people's perception of me. Like when people, and this does happen. So like if I'm having coffee with someone that doesn't know that I have a platform, if I just like meet them at church and I'm like, hey, let's go grab coffee, I want to hear your story, right? I'm like, we're just chatting, we're connecting really, really well. Like, and then I say, dude, like, what's your Instagram or what's your Twitter? Like, are you on these networks? Like, let's keep up there a little bit. So like, if I do that and then they see like my network, then they're like, whoa, what, who are you? What is it? And I'm like, oh no, like that's not, okay. Um, it's, this, I think those kind of, um, those moments also are what helped inspire the tweet of like, okay, like you have to understand that nearly everything I'm saying on my platforms, um, points to Jesus or encourages people to get closer to Jesus, or it's just a random tweet about my life,
Mhm.
which it talks about my honest struggles with
Yeah.
mental health disorder
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Mhm.
depression and stuff like that. But yeah, so I can't when I go to coffee and someone responds in that way, I can't control that they respond in that way, because I think we've been trained in our society that if someone has those followers, they must be important, or they must be saying something important. And I kind of want to get past that, and I want to say like, um, let's get past the idea that number of followers equals level of importance, or
Mhm.
level of wisdom, or level of trustability
Mhm. Mhm.
online, is kind of what I mean
Expertise.
by that. Expertise, right?
Yeah.
There's some dudes that like manage some of the largest social media in the world, millions of followers on social media, but their platforms have like 32 followers, and they're like barely on Facebook and Instagram.
Mhm.
And I'm like, these guys are like the wizards. Like these are the
Yeah.
ones
Yeah.
like doing the thing and like blowing it up. And I'm like, those are the dudes. Like you need,
Mhm.
like, if you don't know those dudes, you need to get in with those dudes if you want that, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm I'm not. And so yeah, it's that. I think that's what a lot of what I mean as well. Um and it's a fine balance, because we do find ourselves in a world where, like, if you want to be like a streamer, like a Twitch streamer, or you want to be um if you want to be an online influencer, like you do have to have a platform. Like you can't have 30 followers and like get deals with these huge brands, because they need you to have a platform.
Sure.
And so yeah, I'm trying to answer this in a way that like leaves room, because um
Leaves room for it to be okay to have that level of
yeah,
notoriety, or okay.
yeah,
Okay.
because I'm like, the tweet itself isn't about having a lot of followers. Like
Mm.
having a lot of followers, I think, is like neither here nor there. I think it's the perception of followers, like meaning like my either I'm looking at my followers and I say my value as a preacher of the word online is contingent on growing more followers. Like
Mm.
if I'm not growing more followers, my job as a gospel orator online is failing. If I'm losing 1,000 followers a month, then I'm failing in my ministry. And that's not the case. That can't be the case, because like followers come and go, but like
Mm.
or it's society looking at me and or looking at someone with a lot of followers and saying like, these people are wise, these people know what's going on, and they put their hat or they put their chips in that bag and they say these people know what they're doing. But the problem with that is like, if John Wylie ever does something stupid, all of a sudden it it makes Jesus look bad. If people say like, this is a guy that like I follow to get closer to Jesus. If I do something wrong at some point in my life and like drop the ball, all of a sudden it skews the image of Jesus,
Mm.
which is a big deal. Or I
Mm.
mean, anybody, like we're seeing. I mean, in the like not even in the Christian world, but we're seeing drama all the time from makeup influencers and from YouTube influencers that like people like put so much weight on these people or so much value on these people based on followers or influence, and then
Mm.
when like something crumbles and it like blows something up, and I'm like, we got to get past that, like we got
Yeah.
to get past that, because like we got to, like, our foundations have to be somewhere else. Like we can't base people's values on this stuff, right? Like,
Mm.
so
Well,
yeah,
what we're actually seeing is imperfect people just living the life that they would live, but now they have um, 2.5 million people watching them live their life, right?
Right.
So they make these mistakes, and people look at them and go, oh, what a deplorable human being.
Yeah.
And they are people just do that in general, and now we just give them followers,
right,
and now people get to watch them do that because vlogging is a thing and live streaming is a thing,
right.
and so I think that if anything, that speaks to our imperfect nature.
Totally.
It speaks to the I don't know, the lack of, well, of course, I think the thing about your tweet that really rung for me, and maybe this has a lot to do with the place that I'm currently in, is that all of those followers and all of the stuff you're making, let's say you're doing something extremely helpful, you're teaching somebody how to do something meaningful. Let's say they're this, you got this guy, he's teaching a CPR class and he's literally saving people's lives, right? Well, all of that at the end of the day is not, it will all become meaningless if it's not about Jesus. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was the ending of your tweet that I thought was so powerful, is, and it begs the question, right? Is it all about Jesus? And it makes you go, oh my gosh, like there are a lot of creators, and the reason I know this is because I've wrestled with this, and surely, as I watch people who are not Christians, I see that they're not even wrestling with this. They're not even worried about this, right? That it's about something else. It's about growing something. Most of the time, it's about obtaining a certain level of happiness through their creation process, or through the things they're creating, or they have this dream that they're trying to get to, and they're enjoying the journey. That's got like a very Gary Vaynerchuk ring to it, doesn't it?
I just love the grind. Like I love to know.
Enjoy the journey, and cool. Enjoy the journey, but
awesome.
But at the end of the day, it's about your happiness. So you have to ask yourself: is life just about your happiness?
Right.
Is that all it is? And be honest with yourself about that. Don't ignore that question, and also don't spend your time on the wrong thing if it's the wrong thing. So I encourage people to deal with that, like I've had to deal with that myself.
I think Jim Carrey has a quote where he
now we're getting into good content.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone Christ-like, it's Jim Carrey. He has this quote where he says, and I think it was just a moment of honest conversation with an interviewer, like something, but he's coined with saying that I wish everyone would get to the pinnacle of success just to realize how empty it is up there.
Yeah, I've heard this. That's so good. People need to get there quicker.
Right. Like, please, like, he's like, please, like, get there and realize just how empty and lonely it is at the top. You can climb the mountain, you can hustle, and you can grind, and you can buy the jets if you're Gary Vee. And like Gary Vee even has said it. Gary Vee himself has said, I'm scared of the day after I buy the jets, because that's what I'm doing all this for.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if Gary Vee, the guy who's like, he's always telling people, stay on their grind, stay on the hustle. Like if you're 40 years old and you still have a dream, go for that dream, right? Like, but he's even said, my dream, my greatest goal in life is to buy the New York Jets. And the thing that terrifies me the most is the day after I buy the New York Jets, because I don't have anything else to hustle for. Yeah. And if that doesn't, like, I'm like, okay, so the Jim Carrey and the Gary V's, like these dudes, they're multi-million-dollar valuation. You got the Jeff Bezos's multi-million-dollar, like Jeff Bezos's dream since he was 5 has been to go to the moon, and he's finally going to do that on his rocket ship, Blue Moon or whatever he named it. Like he's going to do it, and so and that's been his dream his whole life. And I'm curious if this is why he's tried to get all these millions and billions of dollars to like land on the moon. What's he going to do the day after he lands back on Earth after landing on the moon? Of course, he's going to have interviews and he's going to have everything like that. But like his lifelong dream has been attained of going to the moon.
Yeah.
What next? That's a question we got to sit with. So like, I would challenge like people viewing this or listening to this, like think of the thing that like, is it to have 100,000 followers on Instagram? Is it to have a blog go viral? Is it to whatever, get the platinum plaque from YouTube? I don't know. Like, what about the day after, the week after, the year after? Like, is like, And I'm not saying, okay, you got 100,000, now do 1,000,000. And like that's fine. But like, what is the actual thing that like is the biggest thing in your life that you are trying to attain? What is that? And then what happens the day after?
Hmm.
And if it's not Jesus, I think that's where the ending of that tweet is. If it's not Jesus, then it's not going to do anything for you. Like it really isn't. And I'm not saying that from a place of pride or like I've figured out life, I've unlocked the secrets. Like I'm saying that from like reminding myself even that like, hey, I desire to be married. Like that's one of my greatest life's desires, is to be a married dude. But like if that's my hope, my biggest thing, like the day after I get married and have all the benefits of marriage, what is my life going to look like if it's not consistently pointing to Jesus or something bigger than myself? Like we can just go base spiritual here. We don't have to go Jesus at this point, right? We can just go base like something greater than yourself, something like greater than your life. It's not going to be, you're not going to find yourself fulfilled in any way, shape, or form. In my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think,
and in a lot of
that's
successful
right.
people's opinions, a lot of successful people would say the same thing. I think if we got every rich person that people look up to in a single room to like have an honest conversation about like being successful, they would probably all say, man, I wish I wasn't. Like, I wish I could just like go have a burger somewhere without getting bombarded by people. Or I wish like I would give all this up just to have a normal life or a life of meaning and purpose, you know? But if you look at the people that like that just like live gentle, humble lives in your neighborhood, you ask them and they're like, nah, like I'm okay, you know, like I've like I got my family, I got Jesus, or like I'm
listen, my mom is the most content person I know. And she's not rich. She's not, she's not as motivated as I am when it comes to achieving any kind of career or work goals. She's pumped about anything. She could live in like a shack with no insulation and like a chair and a book. You might have to switch out the books every now and then.
Sure.
But she's very content. And I think that has a lot to do with Jesus.
I think, yeah, I agree.
I don't know what else to add to that. I think that was fantastic. I think we covered some good ground there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious, for the believer out there, how could we glorify God through our platforms?
Yeah.
How could we use it for that purpose? There are 1,000 different ways, and there's no way we could go over all of that now, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah. Base level, as you're doing your daily reading or every other day reading, or whenever you read your Bible as a believer, if something sticks out to you that you feel it impacted you, just post that verse, part of the verse, a thought about the verse on your stuff. That'll get people thinking along the same way.
People like Proverbs.
People love Proverbs.
People are down with like a proverb.
And Psalms. Like even people that aren't familiar with the Bible, they know Proverbs and Psalms. Like, I mean, so like you can pull stuff from that all day, every day. And that's great. And I think just even more practically, like, as you're growing your platform, or as you're doing your hustle, or as you're just on social media, like be encouraging to people. If you see something that you really enjoy, just like say, man, like that's a beautiful thing you made, or man, that tweet got me thinking. Or if they've done nothing of value that day to your feed, just inbox them or send them a mention and just like say, hey, thinking about you, I hope you're doing well, things like that I think do great good in kingdom. I think
the one-on-one is very powerful online.
Super.
Right. Even though your presence is very one-on, 2, 3, 4,000, 5,000, 50,000. It's the one-on-one stuff is really powerful, especially if if somebody's interacting with you on Instagram, or you can try to be strategic about ways to get into conversations with people, go have coffee with people, which I think is even more effective. Things like that. I think all of that's very, very powerful.
Yep.
But it takes work.
It does. It takes work and it takes intentionality. So it takes you actually getting on the app, getting on, looking for the person that maybe came to your mind while you were, praying or reading, or, a lot of my deep thoughts, and I don't know, like, is in the shower. So like, as I'm in the shower, like, I'll be like, a certain person will come to mind and I'm like, that's random. Like, why did they come to mind? And then I'll like hop on social and I'll be like, do we follow each other still? And I'm like, we do. And then I can like message him and be like, hey, was just like thinking about you today. Hope you're doing good.
Yeah. Shower, tweet, your phone explodes, and you're like, oh, I was just trying to do something good.
I'm fine, whatever. So like, I think social in general, and this is the move that I'm seeing across the board, but social in general is getting away from the macros, so the large following, growing a mass following, into the micro. So it's into the DMs, it's into the mentions, it's into the WhatsApps and the grabbing coffee and the hopping on a Zoom call or a Discord call, or like what. It's getting from like the big into the life on life touch points, and I think that's good, and I think that's a healthy place. As long as you're approaching it from a healthy place. I think
society always does this, where it does this, it goes way in this direction, then it comes back this direction, oftentimes overcorrects. I think like, for example, if you go back a little bit, you'll have a society that was just hyper religious, and then you have the flip side of that, which may be something like nihilism, right? You have the people who are like, nothing matters, I make my own rules. You have that, and then we'll do this back and forth forever and ever and ever. And I think that the interesting thing is this: the internet is that, but digital. It's happening the same way in a lot of ways. Now, I'm sure that there are things that I think there have been plenty of things, even so far with the internet, that we had no idea what was going to happen, and then we have chaotic events happening that we never could have come up with, but yeah, you get this wild back and forth thing. I think the truth is often generally somewhere in the middle of there, but anyway, I threw that in there. Who knows what we can do with that, but
it's true. Yeah.
But yeah, so with social media, I think it is fantastic that we're getting back Clubhouse. A great example.
Yep.
Clubhouse is like, I think it's a response, because you had Twitter, which is, very quick, rather impersonal at times, and people are just absolute lunatics and mean to each other. And then you have like an Instagram, which is like, okay, I'm going to share a thing and it's going to get a bunch of likes and some comments, but it's generally the one to the everybody else. YouTube, the one to the everybody else, more or less. I mean, you got chat rooms and things like that. That's great. But Clubhouse is like, all right, we're going to have, 6 people actually talk to each other, and we're going to actually be able to hear each other's voices
and tone
and be kind of like intimate and hear each other's voices like in your ear canal. And when I first started going into Clubhouses, and even to this day, being somebody who struggles with social anxiety, when I go to click that button, my body is shaking. It's horrifying. I have a thought to add. It's like, it's scary stuff, and I don't know how much of that is what, but I love that something like Clubhouse has jumped in, and now we have more one-on-one. I think we should be leveraging that stuff.
Yes,
as believers, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I get tired of the religious Twitter, the Christian Twitter bashing heads about silly things, silly opinions about doctrine, that I'm like sometimes, like the supremacy of Christ and the Trinity and the the truthfulness of his word. Yeah. I mean, we can fight. I mean, not fight, but like stand on that all day, but like, it just got silly there. I mean, I think every ideology was challenged through COVID, and social media didn't help at all. I think people got angsty and angry, and everyone was sitting in their feelings at home for a long time.
Yeah.
And in the moment you saw something you didn't agree with, you just lashed out, and you seemed to forget that the other handle on the other side of the screen is a person also going through lockdown.
It's hard, it's hard when there's so much anger, because you'll have somebody say something, I'll look at it and I'll go, that sounds pretty reasonable, or fairly reasonable. I don't necessarily agree with it. It's not quite where I would fall on that issue, but I understand where they're coming from, or
Right.
I hate that viewpoint. I think it's dangerous, right? But then
Right.
you'll go below, and it's like people are calling each other
Bro.
names, and people want to, they're like, your family should die, and it's like, well, how did we get here?
Yeah. What? Like, what? Why can't you just say you disagree with me and like let it be there and we can have a conversation? Like, why you got to bring like, why you got to tell me to kill myself or that you hope my family dies? Or like, I'm like,
Yeah.
why? Like, what made you take that jump? Right? Like, what in the world, people?
I think a lot of times morality is actually cowardice. I think it's people trying to fall into the box and not cause too much of a stir. I think Twitter allowed a lot of people from its inception, and the internet from its inception allowed a lot of people to be semi-anonymous, but either way, whether they're an egg or they're a face and they have a name, you still are not it's still impersonal, and they can get away with it. Nobody's going to hurt them. At the very worst, they'll lose their Twitter account, but generally people don't. So we've created this culture where people start saying these things. But to me, that's a symptom of a lot of angry hearts and a lot of people who don't think very critically about things.
Yeah.
On both sides of everything. Yep. And if we want to go political, both sides of the political aisle.
I'm with you. Yep.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, let's move from politics to the church, shall we?
Okay. Quite similar in a lot of ways, but yeah, here we go.
Can be. Yeah. So I'm curious for you. I have a lot of issues that I wrestle with in regards to the church and the expression of the church and its various forms. And
yeah,
I mean, this is, from a denominational standpoint, obviously, but this is, and we have people who are claiming to be of the faith who are not of the faith because their beliefs aren't actually biblical beliefs. Right. And then you have people who are, who are generally, I feel like I hit a tendon there.
A little bit, okay. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have people who are very much, they look like us, they sound like us, and their core beliefs are there, but we have a lot of in-house issues. And maybe there are things about the way that, the culture of the church that are problematic, or kind of like what we're getting at the beginning, the celebritification, if that's a word, of pastors, and things like that. So, it seems like there's a lot there for you, but you choose a good place to start. What's something that bothers you about that?
About the church and kind of where we're at today?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, man, there's a lot. So really what stuck out to me, there's this trend going on right now where people are doing what's called a deconstruction of their faith or deconstruction of their life in general, where they're looking at their lives and they're saying, okay, like, what have I been taught culturally, societally, religiously about life and the viewpoints of life that I've like grasped onto just because like authority was telling me like, this is what I need to do, parent, guardian, whatever, like, and I think that's okay. Right. I think like that's okay. But where I have an issue is when, similar to what you said, when there's thought leaders and key leaders in these spheres of society that are saying like, some people would say, I'm still a Christian, but I don't necessarily believe that Jesus is God and that he was born of a virgin and he died and had a bodily resurrection. And I'm like, so you're not a Christian, right? Like, so like, that's like the tenet of Christianity, right? Like Jesus taught a lot of cool things and said a lot of great stuff. And I mean, you can
think that, but don't call yourself a Christian.
Right. You can love what Jesus said and try to follow everything that he said, other than, the whole take up your cross and follow me and deny yourself and all these, but like you can do that, right? But you're not a Christian, because the thing that makes you a Christian is the surrender to Christ. And it's like salvation in Christ, like that. You can't say that. So that's a dangerous thing, in my opinion.
And salvation by by grace through faith and not by works,
right.
because there's a lot of that going around, obviously, and it
There's
has always been going around.
has always been, yeah. And so, yeah, I think that's a major thing I don't like in the church. Now that we're in, and I can knock the other side. Now that we're in Pride Month, with the LGBTQ community, I think the church has done a terrible job with that community and with those people, many of which are my friends. And I think the church has burned a lot of bridges that shouldn't have been burned, and has demonized a lot of things that shouldn't be demonized, and has caused a lot of harm and trauma to some people that I am heartbroken about. And it's sometimes embarrassing to say I'm a Christian in front of some communities because of the connotation and the meaning that has with them.
That's like people at Chick-fil-A. They think the people at Chick-fil-A actually hate gay people.
Yeah,
they want them to die. Like that's
right.
that. And I'm like,
right.
I don't know where you're getting that from.
I don't think that's true, but like,
yeah, they have a position on how they feel about gay marriage, but that's different than saying that they hate those people. That's actually you can believe it or not, but that's actually an expression of love from them. They believe, that's what they believe. That's what I believe too.
Right.
So yeah, but I think that there's certainly, this might not be the right word, but certainly a PR issue between the church and the LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm. Massive. I think, I mean, there's been hate on both sides, all sides, whatever inside, like every which way in regards to this issue. And I think, it's heartbreaking. And I think like I posted another tweet probably a few months ago talking about sin. And I said, to be 2 times more judgmental about your own sin than you are about other people's sin, and you'll learn how to be grace-filled really quickly.
Oof.
Okay. And I kind of maintain that position that like, hey, like these people, yeah, I mean, we can have our stance on whatever Christian sex ethic we want, whatever we believe about divorce, homosexuality, transgenderism, queer culture. Like we can, and I say queer in a loving way. I don't say queer in like the spiteful way. Like it's a term they use.
Although I started reading the audiobook of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Which was written, I believe, in the 50s or so. Maybe earlier. I forget. Anyway, queer all the way through. I did that book and I was like, whoa, this is different.
yeah.
But it meant
queer has changed definitions a lot in the past century, right?
Right.
But
I know what you mean.
So I think it's that, and I think, and like, to put it bluntly, here's my position. To put it bluntly, like if you're gonna love the divorced couple in your church, then you should love the gay couple in your church. And that doesn't always mean like support and like cheer on and like be affirming, but like we should love them. And it shouldn't be a demonization of these people, like, because God's standard of a sex ethic is even higher than the most saved person can attain on their own. Because Jesus leveled the playing field, and he said, like, even if you look at a woman lustfully, like you've committed sin in your heart, like you've committed adultery in your heart. And like, I don't know about you, man, but like, we don't gotta like put all our dirt on the table, but like I probably do that at least once a week. You know what I mean? Like, it's
my teenage years were
whether knowingly, right, whether knowingly or unknowingly, like not I'm not saying like, oh man, like I need to have sex with her right now in my head, but like, like it's so I think the church has done a really, really bad job in treating sexuality in a Christ-like way.
Yeah.
Jesus himself, when he was confronted with a woman who in that day and age was caught in a sin that was nearly unforgivable in the culture, the woman in adultery, like he, instead of like siding with the religious power, he said, I mean, like, the homie that doesn't have any sin can throw the first stone, right? Like he's like, I get it. I mean, this is God talking, right? He's like, but like whoever is free of sin can judge this woman and can like stone her. But we're casting stones that are hurting people and keeping and setting up a lot of hurt and keeping people away from Christ in a lot of ways because of their experience with us throwing stones at them of judgment and hate and vileness. And yeah, I think that's something right now that pains my heart with the church. And then we can get into the topic of the way the church has handled mental health disorders and depression and medication and therapy, which I think is similar. I think the church
or even just questions like
questions,
theological questions, things
right?
of that sort. I think a lot of churches are very underprepared for that, and I'm
True.
Yeah. So, I think, I agree. First off, just to touch on the homosexuality issue very quickly, I think what we've seen from the church are once again two extremes. We have the people who are deconstructing, putting a pride flag in the front and saying, "Come on in, we affirm you, we affirm your behavior, we affirm your lifestyle." And then you have all the way on the other side, you have people who are treating them with hate. And obviously the worst form of this, and by the way, if you are not a Christian, like Christians look at the Westboro Baptist Church and not a good light.
No.
We don't like them.
We don't align ourselves with them.
We don't align ourselves with them. I think there's a lot of vitriol and anger in their hearts, and it's not right. So you have that side, and you have these two extremes,
right?
And I believe it falls. I mean, I think
somewhere in the middle.
You have I think you shouldn't abandon biblical truths, which is that, in short, it's not God's design for our relationships, for our sexuality, but that you should love the person just the same, knowing that we're all on the same playing field of being sinners, and the difference is Jesus.
Right.
It's
that, right? I have friends that, because of the way the church is handled, they're celibate, same-sex attracted, God-loving, Jesus surrendered people, and the way the church has handled it has affected the way that they approach Jesus in a lot of ways. And it's like, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Like it's,
okay.
It's
Well, on a lighter topic, mental health.
Yes. Slightly lighter.
So what are your thoughts on that?
A lot. So, I think the church is getting better. Probably over COVID, after pastors actually seeing the effects of mental health issues come full force from people being locked down and not knowing if they'll be able to go back to work, and losing loved ones and all these things. Like, I think the church is finally, COVID probably helped the church finally come to a place where, like, okay, maybe therapy and like medication is okay to have, along with Jesus and prayer, and counseling and like pastoral support. For the longest time, it was like, it was a buzzword in church if you went to therapy, or it was a buzzword in church if you were on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, to kind of keep yourself good. And the stance, in a lot of ways, at least here in the Bible Belt, was like, if you struggle with depression, then like you lack faith, because like the Bible says not to be anxious. And so if you're anxious, like you don't have much, like
God says don't.
Says don't. So why are you sinning?
Yeah.
And it's like, hello, like,
but that's like the prescription. Just don't.
Right. Just don't. Just stop. Stop. Like, and I'm like, okay, hold up. Like, let's like, Jesus himself was in the Garden of Gethsemane, stressed out enough and anxious enough about what was going to happen on the cross that he was sweating blood.
That's pretty stressed.
That's stressed, and that's anxious. And you're going to tell me that like he just didn't have enough faith? And Jesus would often withdraw from the crowds to recenter and to like get alone with the Father because it was good for his mental health.
That's one of my favorite attributes about Jesus, because I feel
Same.
like that's where I relate with him the most. Like,
Yeah, Jesus the introvert.
about 5 times a day, I need to go close the door, get
Yeah.
away from everybody,
Yep.
and center myself. I love that that's in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a gift.
And yeah, it's amazing. And like, and Jesus did that, and he had his three dudes that like, yeah, they're like when he went to the garden, he said, "Hey, just stay up for a little bit and pray with me." And like, those were the three dudes that like when he went, the Mount of Transfiguration, because it was Trinity Sunday a couple Sundays ago. Like, it's like, yeah, like he kept himself in check because he knew that our human bodies get out of whack sometimes, and our brains, we can have these thoughts that can get out of whack sometimes. And yeah,
I love these verses that are like, okay, these people that are here, make sure you feed them because they might pass out on the way back to town.
right,
Like, I love that stuff because it's so human.
right. And I love it too. Like the humanity of Christ is something, especially this year and last year, is something that I've really been like digging into and like really being like, oh wow, like, because in my mind, like,
have you seen The Chosen?
I have, and that's what's been like helping blow my mind, because I'm like, Jesus, like, I just watched episode 3 of season 1 again, and like when Jesus is like, the guy that plays Jesus, he's like making those animal noises when the kids were hiding and like acting like a blah 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 blah, like all this stuff. And when he was like, "And Father, if there happen to be 2 little children hiding behind, let them say shalom so that they can, be my friend." I'm like, oh yes, Jesus. So those little things, like, that's not in the Bible, but like he probably did that because he was human, right? Like, I mean, God, of course, like he's God in human flesh. Like I'm not heretic, but so it's that, right? Like the humanity of Christ. And so along that with mental health, like, I think the church is finally getting to a place, and I thank and praise God for this, that like we're finally getting to a place where we're saying, okay, maybe being depressed and having depression is different, and maybe being anxious and having anxiety is different, and maybe we've done a bad job at loving people and advising people in their mental health journeys and getting right with the Lord and with themselves and with their mind. I mean, sometimes like we just have chemical imbalances, right? That like that we just have to get tweaked. And like once that happens, like we're like, oh wow, like there's Susie. Where's Susie been? Like she's been like tucked away for all these years, and yeah, and it's something I'm passionate about, and it's something that I think we're finally getting some ground on in the church, is the acceptance of therapy and medicine and pastoral support through mental health.
Yeah, I consider these things to be gifts from God. These, a counseling session or medication in some circumstances, I consider those to be gifts from God. I consider a good plan for how to keep yourself from, I don't know, it could be something related to mental health. It could be, having accountability so you're not looking at porn. It could be any number of things, any number of vices that we'll get ourselves caught into. Those are, I think God wants us to use the tools available to us. He wants us to use community, and he wants us to use the gifts that the community has. And I've been grooving on this idea that all truth is God's truth, right? So while of course we create a delineation between the inspired word of God and everything else, that's still, God has still given us that. Just like he's given us, nature to be healing, for example. Like if you like for me, my treatment is go for a walk around some trees or some water, right? That's it. God gave us that. That's good. Like you use that to refuel yourself. You need to rest, and so I think as we first started speaking about this, I guess my heart kind of is broken a little bit, because I think of all the people I've heard who say that they had issue A, and then they go to either the church or their family, And their response is kind of like what we've been talking about. Well, just go pray about it, and God is good, and he'll help you out, and various versions of that. And people don't get the answers they need. And a lot of times it's like these mental health issues are actually based around trauma. Like you've experienced something profoundly horrible in your life, and you need to build the systems to move past it. It's not like you read the verse and God might do this. He can, but it's not necessarily you read the verse and it all clicks and you're fine now.
Right.
A lot of times it's, you have PTSD from trauma because from your childhood, and you need to go to somebody who specializes in that so that you can work through that and move to a place of peace and boldness, and all of those things you can find in the Bible. It helps, gives you direction. Okay, what am I moving towards? Okay, I want to be this, right? But the way that you get from A to B has a lot in the middle where you can utilize these tools.
Yep.
And I think that's where, and then there's the aspect, which is very, I guess, very important and personal to me, is if you go to somebody with questions about your faith, so we were talking about the people who are deconstructing their faith. We need more people who are in the right place at the right time to speak to these people and explain to them why their thinking is sideways. Right. Help them think critically about the thing, help them deal with it. I had a really amazing interaction with a pastor when I was growing up, really helpful. And I think it helped me in my journey later on as I hit adulthood, where I was like, okay, how do we know Jesus? How do we know he was who he says he was? Like, how do we know he exists? How do we know he resurrected? How do we know that we can trust, the Bible, all of these things? And he just gave me, at that time, it was just like a little taste, but it was like, okay, we got this guy named Josephus, who was a rabbi, and he wrote about Jesus. He was not a Christian. He was not friendly to Christians. He wrote about Jesus, and he wrote about his brother James being martyred for believing in Jesus. And so, bro, do you have a brother, John? Okay. So, it's kind of difficult to convince you that your brother is the Messiah, correct?
Right.
Okay. Yep. So same here. And I don't think my brother or my sister are the Messiah. Well, James believed that his brother was the Messiah and died for that truth. And then you have all the other disciples who, I think all but one died for that, because they were going out and spreading the gospel after Jesus died. So that's profound. That's powerful to me. And, that's just a little bit of it. But anyway, I got a taste of that when I was speaking to him. And that was some right answers, right? That was good. I think people need to be in place, and pastors, and maybe this is somebody who this is their job, to kind of be theologically in an apologetics mindset, and an apologetics, what's the word? They're skilled at that. Yeah. They've spent time working on that, so that when people come with these questions, they can give them real solid answers early on, and they can go with that, and people can move through that process with better information. So
yeah, I agree. And I think I love apologetics. Don't get me wrong. It's great. I geek out about it. I don't like the form of apologetics that kind of took root maybe in the 90s and early 2000s, where it was like this militant apologetics of like, you just walk up to random strangers and start having conversations about like, all right, so you, by your own admission, you're this, like that kind of. Right. I'm like, it can work for people. What, like the thing that I've been loving, there's a course called the Alpha course that was developed in Europe, and it's about asking questions.
Sounds like a CrossFit course,
right? Life's hardest questions, like about faith, the Bible, Jesus, all this stuff. And it's constructed in a way that the leaders of the conversation don't actually answer the question straight up, but they walk through with people on with their question and just explore what their question means, where they're coming from with the question, all this stuff. So rather, like, if someone came to the group and said, like, I don't believe that Jesus is God, you wouldn't just give them answers of like, well, here's why he is, boom, 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 boom. But you like enter in this journey of like 12 to 16 week journey of like unpacking faith in Jesus and the Bible and the authority of all these things. And by the end of it, like, you can either decide that it makes sense or you can do it again. And there's no pressure, right?
Yeah,
There's no like, you must pray this prayer right now. Like, but like, you just honestly sit there with your questions. And you have people that have been Christians their whole life asking questions. And you have people that like never trusted Jesus or never even heard of Jesus come into the group. And like, and it's this beautiful mix of like, oh my goodness, like here we are, we're all at the table and we all have questions about something, even those who have been following Jesus for their whole life.
Yeah.
And we're here to explore this weird in-between middle ground of like faith and Christ and how we respond to that in the world. And I think that, like you're saying, I think more churches need that kind of pastoral oversight, because that's kind of where we're at as a society, as a spiritualized society. Very few people in the world today, from even my interactions, would say that there is no God. More and more people are getting comfortable in saying universe, spirit, manifesting, spiritual words like
God is
that.
God is me, God is
God is
everybody,
me, God is universe, God is in you, God is in, like, we're vibing together. Like, I'm cool. I'm cool with that kind of language. Like, some people get offended by it, but I'm like, that's a starting place. Like, we're no longer at a place where people are like, there definitely is no God. Now people are in this place.
You can certainly have different types of conversations with those people. It opens up different doors. That, because with obviously, with the atheist, you're the first battle you're fighting is like, okay, or you can choose to approach it how you want, but a reasonable way to go about it is okay, well, first off, let's talk about if there is a God at all, right? But with somebody who is embracing some level of spirituality, if you will, they're very open to having that. And a good example of this, I have quite a few friends in the LDS church. I've spoken with them quite a bit. I lived in Salt Lake City for a while, and so that was actually a spark in my journey, because I would have people come into my door. I had my friends, and I was like, okay, where do they fall on this? Because they sound a lot like me, but I'm not sure where they're at. And so it's actually really easy to talk to them about the faith, because a lot of the words are the same. Like, and now what you have to do is you have to go, okay, you mean this, right? By this word, I mean this by this word, right? So you have to, you have to play with that, but
define the terms and all that kind of stuff.
But I find it actually incredibly easy to have that conversation with them if they're willing to engage. And so there's a blessing to that. I think it's obviously problematic to believe that the universe is, the rocks are God and all of this stuff.
Sure.
But and that we're all like an interconnected God,
right?
Thing. Everything. God is us and in us and all of this. I think that's obviously a very problematic approach, but
totally
but it really does open up different doors. Yeah. And so where were you going with that? Did I cut something off?
No, I think we're like, societally, I think things are shifting in a way that, like, we no longer, as Christians, we no longer have to be that like that offensive defense, right? Like, where we're like, God, go get them, like, stand in the, what, like, I think we're finally in a place where people are open to spiritual things and spiritual conversations in a way that maybe we haven't seen in a long time in American society, at least. Because I think, like, they say that like Europe is ahead of us by like so many years, and like right now they're in a post-Christian society is what people say. So like, whereas it used to be like a center Mecca thing of Christianity, but like now they're post-Christian. And I think what preceded that was a lot of what we're seeing right now in America of spiritualization and like all that kind of stuff of like we're all like universe and like universalism and all this kind of stuff, which I'm like, this is our opportunity. Like we no longer have to be those jerks that are like coming up to people and like, you're an idiot if you don't believe. Like we can actually like approach these weird and awkward conversations and be honest, because like I've lived Jesus for a whole lot of time in my life and I still got questions that I wrestle with and that I'm reading Genesis and I'm like, where are these people coming from? Like, there are only 35 people in the world, and you saying there were other tribes. Where did they come from? You know, I'm like, who are these guys? And then like, all this stuff, right? So like, I'm still in this boat of like I trust Jesus and I love Jesus and I'm going to live the rest of my life for him. But like, I'm still honestly approaching God, like saying, I don't know what you mean by this. And I don't know if I fully like trust everything every day, but like I'm doing my best. And I think that's the honest conversations we need to start having as Christians with the spiritual people and saying like, look, like God isn't scared of your questions and concerns about his policies. Like he's not, you just got to deal with it. He's not like that. Like I mean, the imagery is a shepherd, right? So he will lead us. And sometimes he makes us lay down in green pastures, but other times he just lets us like roam the green pastures. And when we get too far away, like he brings us back in. And like, there's this ebb and flow with the rhythms of grace and God that I find refreshing in the Psalms and Proverbs and throughout scripture of how Jesus's way of ministry. And, I think we're finally at a place where we as Christians can enter in those awkward and weird conversation spaces with people and just say like, you know, here it is, like the thing you're searching for and the thing you're really open to, like it's Jesus. Like Jesus made all this by his word and by his power. He's sustaining everything. So when you're saying universe is doing this, like it's Jesus, it's really Jesus speaking it. And I can show you where it says that in the Bible. And like, I can show you like all these things. And more people are open to those conversations. It's not as threatening anymore.
And you know, they'll come to you very boldly and be like, oh my gosh, I had this, you know, I was on LSD the other week and I had this crazy experience, where, you know, I spoke to Mary and I have a friend that if by chance he's watching this, I love you, Connor. But you know, like they'll have these crazy, amazing experiences. And they'll come to you and go, I mean, this is like, I am going after this. This is doing some great things for me. And so when they do that, that's a really nice open door for you to come in and go, okay, great. Well, listen, I got this thing too. We got Jesus, we got the Trinity, we got, there's prophecy in the Old Testament. That's a fun thing to talk about. You know, like, I mean, you can go into all sorts of realms. Whereas with, you know, in the past, it could have been, you know, had a lot of atheistic people, they would look at you like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? You know, I agree. I think that's a really interesting point.
You can really get into like the Ezekiel's where he's talking about wheels within wheels and wheels that are spinning and like orbiting and the angels with their wings and how they're moving around without flapping their wings, praising God. And like, we can talk trippy. Like the Bible has some trippy stuff that even to this day confounds even the smartest theologians of Christianity. That like, I'm like, I mean, Bible says some trippy stuff and like it explains some trippy stuff. Like heaven's
I love that part because whenever I'm talking to people of various faiths, I always say, I'm like, listen, the things I believe are just as strange as the things you believe.
Right.
You know, we have some common ground there.
Yeah.
The question is, who's right? Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, so to shift, I want to talk about, because we, in our little bit of time we have left here, I want to talk a little bit about yourself. And one of the things that we spoke about earlier, and I think that is very important to you, is you've emphasized your own mental health on various platforms.
Yeah.
And so why have you decided to do that? Why is that important to you? And how do you think, you know, how are you trying to help people with that?
Yeah, a lot of it is de-tabooing the conversation in a lot of ways. So similar to how we were talking earlier about the way the church has handled people that approach them with these issues and with these struggles, I want to be a forefront of saying like, look, I'm a dude that like that I'm passionate about kingdom. I'm passionate about Jesus. I read his word. I study it. I love it. And yet, even still, I pray every day. I still struggle with depression every now and then, seasonal depression. And it comes out of nowhere, slaps me in the face, takes me out for a day or two sometimes. But like,
I moved to Florida so I could avoid that.
that's amazing. Yep. Yeah. I'm jealous of that. But it's that. So it's demystifying, detabooing the conversation of like, look, dude, like my life is pretty open online. People can see my journey with Jesus in a lot of ways online. And when I do go through these valleys of depression and sorrow, like I know God is with me because his word says so. He's been with me all along. He's gotten me through many other bouts of depression. 2, I trust my soul with him. I know he cares for me. 3, like I serve him, love him, and honor him, and I pray and read his word every day. So like when people come at me and they like throw these like generic Bible verses at me about like all this stuff, I'm like, I get where you're coming from, but like I already know that, right? Like when I'm in my place of depression, it's not that I'm saying like woe is me, woe is like I hate my life and blah blah blah. It's literally, I think it's literally just like a chemical thing seasonally that happens in my brain that I just shut off. And it just happens. And like through the whole time, I'm still praying to God. I'm still doing the thing, but like it's just a dark time. And I think we're finally, my heart is to tell people that it's okay to be in those places sometimes. Like you haven't lost your salvation. You're not less precious to Jesus. You're not a terrible Christian. You're not doing it wrong. It's your body, and it's trauma that you're dealing with, that you're going to therapy for, hopefully, that you're getting medicine for. Like, so that's I kind of want to lead the way in those honest moments of saying like, here I am, like, here's what's going on. And that's kind of my heart and why I share about it online.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. And I love the practicality of talking about it that way, in this juxtaposition of here I am, I love Jesus, I follow Jesus, but look, I struggle a lot with things. There are things I deal with that are extremely tough. I go through seasons where life is hard. I'm not perfection, and I'll never be perfection. Mm-hmm. And once again, I mean, obviously, there are tools out there according to whatever you're dealing with, and no one should ever, if somebody's dealing with something really intense and they need to speak to a professional, they need to speak to a professional, and and people need to lead them to professionals and say, listen, you have to do this so that you can get better. And here's why, here's where you can end up. Here's a vision. Right. And one of the things I love so much about the certain practical areas of scripture is that you get things like, when you are weak, he is strong, right? And he's glorified through your weakness. Mm-hmm. So God's using that, right? It's not like the, prosperity thinking where it's like, okay, you're not going to have those things. God is going to move those things away from you, and you're not going to have to experience them. It's God sovereignly might put those things in your life, and you're going to wrestle with them.
Yep.
And you have a role in that, but he's using that as part of his plan for your life to glorify himself, and he works it out for his glory and for your good. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you have this other thing, which is so interesting, which is consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. Right. So it's like, okay, I'm supposed to be, it's good to be weak, even though I hate it. And God's doing great things. And I can look at what he's doing, and that can bring me comfort. And I can trust in him, even though I don't understand. Like, it wouldn't be my way of doing it. I'd prefer just to be happy, but I can trust God, because he is God, and he is a lot smarter than I am, to understate it. So I can trust him in that. I can choose to trust him in that. And then I can choose to have joy in the midst of it. And joy doesn't necessarily mean you're just feeling happy. Joy is a much deeper thing. It's something where you go, okay, I'm in a very dark season. Someone I know just died. this is really rough, but I know that God is here. I know that I can, let me pursue that joy, whatever that looks like, and find that peace and comfort, find those moments of, he leads me by still waters, like that sort of idea where in the midst of it, you're pursuing peace and joy with Jesus in those moments. And when, I don't know, when you're able to do that diligently, you find so much rest and peace and comfort in that. And it's power. I follow, there's a guy I follow on Instagram. He said that this is the only time that you're going to be able to worship in suffering. And I thought that was such an interesting.
That's profound, right?
Right? Isn't that powerful?
Yeah.
Like, I think we should leverage that. I think there's something, it's tough to say. There's something sweet about suffering. Even though it's hard. I don't mean to take away from the hardness of it, but I hope people get what I'm saying. But yeah, I think it's both. I think it's like all of these biblical truths, and it puts you in the right framework. It gives you the right lens for the world and these troubles that you face, and the troubles that you will face in the future, which we should all prepare for. And then we also have this practicality of, okay, let's try to get better. Let's try to take care of ourselves. Let's try to rest. When we're dealing with depression, let's lean into community. Let's lean into whatever help is out there. So, and yeah, I don't have all the answers to that, but that's where my mind kind of goes when I think about all of that.
Yeah, there's a specific verse that I love that it's not specific, but it's when Paul is talking about the thorn in his side.
Yeah,
that he's prayed that would go away many times. I'm so grateful that he didn't define what that thorn was, because
cause a lot of confusion.
It could cause a lot of confusion, but I think it's sweet and it's beautiful because whether that thorn, is lust, pornography, whether that thorn is depression, anxiety, whether that thorn is like whatever, like I don't even know, like whatever it might be, like we know like that it's serving a purpose, right? And that like not that we ignore it, because Paul even says that like he's tried to pray it away, and I'm sure he had accountability with whatever it was, or like whatever, but like I think it's a sweet thing that he didn't say the thorn, which is this, I think it's so that mystery is, it helps.
It's like a good early 2000s punk song that talks about some sort of, trouble that the person was having in their life. And they don't really define it that well, so that everybody who's listening can go, yeah,
exactly.
He gets me.
Oh, I have a struggle too. Okay. So it's that, right? And
I'm I've never thought about that. That's fascinating. That's a fascinating perspective on that.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
So good.
The last thing I guess we can talk about, I'll let you go. So how did you come to know Christ in the first place? When did that journey start?
It's a good question. So I was raised in the church my whole life, really. So I was baptized in the Episcopal Church as a baby, infant baptism. And then probably around 7 or 8 years old, we moved into a Lutheran church. And that's really what I remember about church, is the Lutheran church, and stayed there throughout high school. And then, so I like to tell people that at that stage of my life, I kept Jesus close to me, but I never really let myself get close to Jesus, right? So I studied Jesus. I knew who he was. I served him. I honored him, went to church, did youth group, was a youth group president, whatever the heck that means, and did all that. But it took going to college, and it took like stepping out on my own and exploring faith questions and faith communities, and getting into a Baptist church and going on a mission trip with the Baptist church to like really start exploring like, okay, like a similar thing to deconstruction in a way of just like, like, is this what I believe? And like really like my life starting to like not fall apart, but like life just started happening in a way that wasn't controlled and safe in a familial environment where I was on a college campus in a dorm. found myself in a dark place, just like mentally. This is when I finally started realizing that I have like seasonal depression, is because like I wasn't out of a controlled space where I was like in a safe home environment where I could talk to my parents about anything and, you know, all that stuff. And I was in a dorm room, end of the semester, reached out to a friend and said, man, I'm struggling. Like I'm not doing good. And he came to my dorm room, picked me up. We went
Were you wrestling with just questions about God, questions of
just
faith,
all of it, right?
all of it?
Like,
Okay.
where are you? What's happening? What am I doing? What am I supposed to like 18-year-old John, like
You're in the
probably
void.
probably normal 18-year-old questions, you know, like,
Yeah.
oh, like what is the purpose of all this stuff, you know, and all
Yeah.
this. And my friend comes and grabs me. He was a junior, senior in college at the time, and we go get Starbucks, and I sit across the table from him. And I say, man, I just feel like I'm in a desert and all I need is a drop of water to keep going. He's like, I've been there. Like I get like, and that was music to my ears. Like I've been there. And so we finish our macchiatos and fellowship, and he prays for me, and we go to a young adults night that was normally on that time of day that I was planning on skipping and just like staying in my room because I didn't want to. The last thing I wanted to do was be around people. But his little encouragement and getting those macchiatos and just speaking life into me in that moment was huge enough, or big enough, to where I could step into this young adults gathering. And so I went to the young adults gathering, and it was a pastor that I respect and a musician that I respect who normally did the thing. And it was normally like a typical college gathering, 3 songs, sermon, 2 songs, and you leave. But that night it was different. They had 2 little bar stools on the stage, little acoustic guitar on the stage. Pastor gets up there and says, we're just going to have a prayer night. And so I'm going to give us a topic to pray about. And my friend is going to play some music. We'll pray as he plays. I'll give another topic. We'll pray as he plays. And I was like, perfect. Like, this is great. I just need to like pray about a lot of stuff, you know, right now, you know, just like seek God in a lot of stuff. And so like he leads us through this prayer night. We pray about 7 or 8 things. It was final season. So he was like praying about studies and, you know, may be effective and all these things, and just leads us along. Towards the end of the night, it was a Baptist gathering. So of course, like in the back of my head, I knew this was going to happen, but like, it, you know, so he kind of pauses and music kind of goes down. He's just like lightly strumming the guitar, and he does the whole like, you know, taking a long pause, and he says, maybe you're in this room tonight and you feel like you're in a desert and all you need is a drop of water to keep going. And I was like, oh my God, like this
Did your friend speak to this guy?
Nope. Like we just sit in the back
He like
of the
made
room.
a phone call. He's like, listen,
right, like, hey,
John needs help.
You got to say this. No, he didn't say that. But like the pastor said, maybe you feel like you're in a desert and all you need is a drop of water. And like my gut sinks, you know, and my heart starts racing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I've ever been called out in public by God, like this is the moment, you know, like that's me, you know, like that's me. Oh, have mercy on me, a sinner, you know, that kind of response, right? Like, oh, it's me. And he, in being a Baptist gathering, he does the classic, like, I'm going to follow that question up with another question. If you were to die tonight, do you know for certain where you would go? And like, I started like my immediate reaction was like, of course, like, I list my resume, been on mission trips, served in youth group, went to church my whole life, and blah, 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 blah. And then I was slapped in the face again when it was like, but have I trusted Jesus? Like I've trusted myself and I've done a lot of stuff for Jesus, but have I fully surrendered to like the life that Jesus has for me? And I couldn't think of a moment where I made that commitment, like full on, like Jesus have everything commitment. And he said, if that's you, like raise your hand. And I was like, nope, I'm not raising my hand because I'm John Wylie. I'm the campus Christian who like designate drives for people to parties. And like I'm leading the Bible studies and I'm encouraging people in the Lord every day. Like if I raise my hand, it's the end of me on this campus. Like I'm gonna have to transfer. I'm gonna have to figure my life out somewhere else. So I'm not raising my hand. And he says, I feel like there's someone in this room that needs to raise his hand. And I was like, oh heck, you know. So in my heart, I was like, Jesus, like, you know, it's me. You've called me out multiple times this week, today at coffee, like it's me. Like, and so I'm not saying like I'm not a fan of like the pray like once, like one prayer and you're good thing. Like, but that was the night that I fully surrendered to Christ and fully allowed him to invade my heart and take over the places that I was ashamed of and afraid of that he would get into. And it was the night that I began that journey with Jesus, not for Jesus, but with Jesus. And so, yeah, it was that night. And so whether that was like my salvation story or that was just my surrender story, I don't know. If I had died before that, would I go to heaven? I don't know, so like,
Yeah.
it's this messy thing where like, but that was the night that I made that step.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's that's I think that is the struggle for people who grow up in the church many times.
Yeah.
And for me, I had a lot of struggles. And I still struggle with with at such an early age I started following Jesus.
Right.
And but I started going, okay, hold on, what's the sinner's prayer? Like, what's that about? And then I started thinking about like, and in my head, I have OCD, my brain,
Sure.
I'll struggle with different things like this, and I'm very analytical. So I struggled a lot with like, okay, did I mean this? And did I believe correctly in that moment and all of this stuff? And man, when I learned that the prayer was not the point, that made a huge difference for me. That changed a lot of things, and it's given me a lot of peace. It's still a journey for me, but it's given me a lot of peace. I would say that's a great struggle of my life, but it's given me a lot of peace. And this idea of resting on Jesus right now,
right,
in faith, not resting on something that you did in the past that you have some vague memory of. So I going back to what we struggle with in regards to the church, I've had a very hard time with churches that don't define the gospel well, and then they throw a prayer at the end. Right. And in particular, just of the many things that they may leave out, this idea that we're filled with sin and we need to be made right with God because of our sin, and we're nothing before Him. There's nothing we can do to get to Him. I think in church we like to jump past that part really quick, but when you look in the Bible and you see the people almost consistently who came up to Jesus, they were saying, "Lord, have mercy on me. Like I don't deserve to be here at all. I don't deserve to be anywhere. I mean, I deserve death and destruction. But if you will, if you will you heal me?" And Jesus said the sweet words to them over and over: "Your faith has healed you." Right. That's going on that journey and then deconstructing that if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart, that verse, and just wrestling with that a lot, dealing with all of that and facing it, not turning away from it, which I did for so long. Facing that has given me layers and layers of peace. And so I love that your story is interestingly similar.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's crazy because so like my skeptical brain, when I read verses like, if you confess with your heart and believe with or if you confess with your mouth and believe with your heart that Jesus is Lord, I'm like, well, what about like the mute people that like can't speak?
Right.
What about deaf people? Like how are they supposed to do it? Does signing count? Is God like, nope, didn't come from your mouth? So I'm like, I don't know. And it's that, and it's a beautiful thing of like this journey of just meeting with Him regularly and just saying like, Lord, here I am today. With everything I know about me, I'm trusting everything I know about you. And would you just show yourself a little bit more to me every day or today? Would our walk become more real for me today? And just doing that. And I think that those are the prayers that move the heart of the Father. I think those are the honest prayers of like, okay, like I can work with this, like, okay, like I can step into this. Yeah.
And I've heard it put that to rest your weight in faith on the finished work of Jesus. So it's not this like striving and amount of prayer and like understanding this just right and all of these things. It's resting your weight on the finished work of Jesus today, now. And you can look at that and gain confidence from that, right?
True.
Yeah. So, so I love that we got into that just now. That was fantastic.
So good.
That was a good place to wrap up. Okay, well, very good. I'm going to end this now. I don't think I actually need to like say an ending because I'm going to be cutting this. Even though there might be a slight chance that I don't. But anyway, okay, bye everyone.
See you guys.